The air in the old house was thick, not with dust but with something heavier, an invisible pressure that clung to Lila's skin like damp cloth. She inherited the place from her estranged aunt, a woman she barely knew who'd lived alone in this crumbling Victorian relic on the edge of town. The lawyer had handed her the keys with a warning. "Your aunt was particular. Be careful what you touch." Lila dismissed it as small-town superstition, but now, standing in the foyer, she felt it. A pulse, faint but undeniable, thrumming through the walls. She wasn't alone. Her younger brother Ethan hovered behind her, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his eyes darting to the shadows pooling in the corners. At 17, he was all sharp edges and defiance, but the house seemed to shrink him. "This place is a dump," he muttered, kicking at a warped floorboard. "Why are we even here?" "Because we've got nowhere else," Lila snapped. Their parents were gone, car accident 2 years prior, and the foster system had chewed them up and spat them out. The house was their last chance, a roof over their heads until Lila, barely 20, could figure out a plan. But the weight of that responsibility, and now this house, pressed harder with every step. The first night they slept on sleeping bags in the living room, the furniture still draped in dusty sheets. Lila woke to a sound, a whisper, not words, but a low, sibilant hum like wind through a cracked window. She sat up, heart hammering. Ethan was asleep, his breathing uneven. The sound stopped. She told herself it was nothing, just the house settling, but her skin prickled. Morning brought no relief. The house felt alive, its creaks and groans too rhythmic, too deliberate. Lila found a locked door in the basement, its frame etched with strange, looping symbols that hurt her eyes to trace. Ethan, restless, explored the attic and came down pale, clutching a leather-bound journal. "It's Aunt Clara," he said, voice tight. "You need to read this." The journal was a descent into madness. Clara wrote of the voice that lived in the house, a presence that demanded choices, small at first, then crueler. "It knows what you fear," she'd scrawled. "It makes you choose, and every choice costs." The final entry was a single line: "I chose wrong." Lila wanted to leave, but the house was their only asset, and selling it would take time they didn't have. Ethan, though, was fixated. "What if it's real?" he asked, eyes wide. "What if it's watching us?" She told him to stop, but doubt gnawed at her. That night, the whisper returned, clearer, curling around her thoughts: "Choose." The next morning, Ethan was gone. Lila found a note on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry. It told me to choose between you and me. I chose me." Her stomach dropped. She tore through the house, calling his name, but the room seemed to shift, hallways stretching longer than before. The basement door was open now, the symbols glowing faintly. She descended, the air growing colder, thicker, until she stood before a stone wall that hadn't been there yesterday. A voice, not Ethan, not human, spoke from within: "Choose. Save him or save yourself." Lila's mind raced. Ethan was all she had left, but the voice's tone carried a promise of pain. She remembered Clara's journal, the consequences of every choice. If she chose Ethan, what would it demand? Her life, her sanity. But if she chose herself, could she live with abandoning him? The whisper pressed harder, filling her skull, drowning her thoughts. She screamed, "I choose him." The wall shuddered and Ethan stumbled out, eyes glassy, unharmed but changed. He wouldn't meet her gaze. "What did you do?" he whispered. The house groaned and the whisper laughed, a sound that promised it wasn't done. They fled to a motel, but the wait followed. Ethan barely spoke, his eyes darting to shadows only he could see. Lila found new entries in Clara's journal in her own handwriting, though she swore she hadn't written them. "It's not over. It never leaves." The motel room grew colder. The whisper returned, faint but growing: "Choose again." Lila stared at Ethan, sleeping fitfully, and felt the house's pulse in her veins. What had she unleashed? Would it follow them forever? And what would it demand next? The motel room felt like a cage, its peeling wallpaper and buzzing fluorescent light doing little to dispel the chill that had followed Lila and Ethan from the house. Ethan sat on the edge of the sagging bed, his knees drawn up, staring at nothing. Since his return from the basement, he'd spoken only in fragments, his voice hollow, as if something else had taken root inside him. Lila clutched Clara's journal, the fresh entry: It's not over. It never leaves, burned into her mind. She hadn't written it, yet the ink was hers, the loops of the letters unmistakable. The whisper returned that night, threading through the thin walls like a living thing. Choose again, it hissed, louder now, insistent. Lila's hands shook as she pressed them to her ears, but the sound burrowed deeper, coiling around her thoughts. Ethan flinched, his eyes darting to the corner where shadows seemed to writhe. "It's angry," he muttered. "It knows you chose." Lila's stomach twisted. She saved him, but at what cost? The journal offered no answers, only cryptic warnings scrawled in Clara's frantic hand. "The choice binds you, it feeds." She grabbed Ethan's arm, his skin cold despite the humid August night. "We need to leave, farther this time." They packed what little they had and drove north, the car's engine a frail shield against the silence that settled between them. The whisper faded but never vanished, a faint echo in Lila's skull. They stopped in a small town, renting a cramped apartment above a laundromat. For a week, it seemed they'd escaped. Ethan began to eat, to speak, though his smiles never reached his eyes. Lila dared to hope. Then the dream started. Every night she saw the basement door, its symbols glowing, and a figure she couldn't quite see, its voice a promise of more choices. She woke each time with scratches on her arms, shallow but precise, as if drawn by an unseen hand. Ethan noticed too. His own dreams left him trembling, muttering about the price. One evening, as rain lashed the windows, Lila found another entry in the journal, written in her hand again. "The third choice is coming." Her breath caught. The apartment felt smaller, the air heavier. Ethan stood by the window, his reflection distorted, his eyes glowing faintly yellow for a split second before returning to normal. He turned to her, voice flat. "It says I have to choose now." Lila's heart pounded. The whisper surged, filling the room. "Him or you. Decide." Ethan's gaze locked with hers, unblinking, and she saw something alien peering back. Was he still her brother, or had the house claimed him? If she chose herself, could she live with losing him? If she chose him, what would it take from her this time? The journal slipped from her hands, pages fluttering as the whisper laughed, and the lights flickered out. Outside, the rain drummed on, masking the sound of something, or someone, moving closer. The future hung uncertain, the stakes higher than ever, and the answers remained buried in the dark. The apartment plunged into darkness, the rain outside a relentless drumbeat against the windows. Lila's breath hitched as she fumbled for her phone, its weak light casting jagged shadows across the room. Ethan stood motionless, his silhouette framed by the window, the faint yellow glow in his eyes flickering like a dying bulb. The whisper coiled tighter around her mind, its demand relentless, "Him or you. Decide." Her chest tightened, each option a blade against her soul. "Ethan, fight it," she pleaded, stepping toward him. His head tilted, unnatural, like a puppet on frayed strings. "It's not me choosing," he said, voice layered with that alien timbre. "It's us." The journal lay open on the floor, its pages rustling despite the still air, revealing a new line in her handwriting. "The price is blood." A sharp pain lanced through Lila's palm. Blood welled from a cut she didn't remember making. The whisper laughed, a sound that scraped her nerves raw. She grabbed Ethan's shoulders, shaking him, but his skin was ice cold, his stare vacant. The room seemed to pulse, the walls closing in, and she glimpsed movement outside, shadows shifting in the rain, converging on the building. Desperation clawed at her. If she chose Ethan, would it demand her life? If she chose herself, would he become its vessel entirely? The whisper pressed harder. "Time runs out." Her blood dripped onto the journal, and the symbols from the basement door flared on the page, glowing through the paper. Ethan's hand twitched toward her throat, his expression blank, and she stumbled back, heart pounding. A crash shattered the tension. The apartment door flew open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. The whisper surged, "Choose now." Lila's mind raced, torn between love and survival as Ethan's fingers brushed her neck. Outside, the shadows pressed closer, their intent unclear. The journal's glow intensified, and a new entry began to form. "The choice is made." The lights flared back on, blinding her, and Ethan collapsed, gasping. But the whisper lingered, faint but growing, and the shadows outside didn't retreat. Had she chosen? Or had it chosen for her? The unanswered questions hung heavy, the future a void of dread. The sudden flare of light seared Lila's eyes, leaving spots dancing in her vision as Ethan crumpled to the floor, his gasps ragged but human again. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse, weak but there. The journal lay open, its glowing symbols fading, the new entry incomplete. "The choice is made," trailed off, the ink smudging with her blood. The whisper had quieted, but its presence lingered like a shadow at the edge of her mind, waiting. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the shadows beyond the broken door remained, their shapes indistinct yet watchful. Lila's phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. "You delayed it, not stopped." Her stomach dropped. She hauled Ethan to his feet, his weight heavy against her, and they stumbled toward the exit, the apartment's air thick with an unnatural chill. They made it to the car, the engine sputtering to life as they peeled away from the laundromat. Ethan slumped in the passenger seat, his eyes half open, murmuring incoherently about the price and the next choice. Lila gripped the steering wheel, her bloody palm leaving smears on the leather. The road stretched into the night, the rearview mirror reflecting nothing but darkness, no pursuing shadows, yet the unease grew. The whisper returned, faint but clear. "The debt grows." Hours later, they stopped at a roadside diner, its neon sign flickering in the early morning haze. Inside, the hum of conversation and clink of coffee mugs felt surreal after the night's horrors. Lila cleaned her wound, wincing as the antiseptic stung, while Ethan stared at his hands, as if expecting them to move on their own. The journal, tucked into her bag, seemed to pulse faintly through the fabric. A waitress approached, her smile too wide, her eyes lingering too long. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice carrying an odd echo. Before Lila could respond, a newspaper on the counter caught her eye, dated today, August 7, 2025, headlined "Mysterious Disappearances Linked to Old House." The address matched Clara's. Her blood ran cold as the whisper stirred again. "The third choice nears." Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes glowing briefly before dimming. "It's here," he whispered. The diner's lights flickered and the shadows outside the windows began to shift. Lila's heart raced. Had they brought it with them, or had it always been ahead? The waitress's smile widened and the journal's glow intensified. The next choice loomed, its stakes unknown, leaving them teetering on the edge of an uncertain fate. The diner's air grew thick, the hum of conversation fading as if the world held its breath. Lila's eyes darted between the newspaper's damning headline and the waitress, whose smile stretched wider, revealing teeth too sharp for a human face. Ethan's whisper, "It's here," hung in the air, and the journal in her bag pulsed like a second heartbeat. The lights flickered again, casting the room in a strobe of shadow and light, and the shadows outside pressed closer, their forms coalescing into vague, humanoid shapes. Lila grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward the exit, but the door wouldn't budge, locked, though no key turned. The waitress glided forward, her movements unnaturally smooth, her voice a distorted echo. "You can't run from the choice." The journal slipped from Lila's bag, falling open to a new entry in her handwriting. "The third choice is blood and soul." Her blood-streaked palm throbbed, the cut reopening as if summoned. Ethan staggered, his eyes flaring yellow again, and he muttered, "It wants me to choose you." The whisper roared back, filling her skull, "Him or you. Blood seals it." Outside, the shadows pounded against the windows, cracking the glass. Lila's mind raced. Saving Ethan might cost her soul, but losing him to this thing was unthinkable. The waitress reached for her, nails elongating into claws, and Lila shoved Ethan behind her, shouting, "Take me instead." The room erupted in a flash of light, the windows shattering inward. When her vision cleared, the diner was empty, the waitress gone, the shadows dispersed, and Ethan slumped against a booth, his breathing shallow. The journal lay open, its latest entry complete. "The debt is paid for now." But the whisper lingered, a faint thread. "The next will be steeper." They fled into the night, the car's tires screeching as they left the diner behind. Ethan's color returned, but his eyes held a haunted look, as if he remembered something she didn't. The road stretched endlessly, the rearview mirror reflecting only darkness, until a pair of yellow eyes blinked back. Lila's heart sank. Had she saved him or bound them both deeper? The unanswered questions loomed, the future a tightening noose.